a lot of people have started to act as if the supreme Christian ethic is do not judge, don't make any judgments. And if you read the passage where Jesus says, do not judge, in that same passage, he says, to judge. And it's not really, it's very inaccurate to just lift out the do not judge and not look at the judge. If you look at the context of what Jesus is talking about, he's saying, don't think that you can judge someone's heart or character by superficial things on the outside appearance. He's saying, do not try to serve as the one who judges what is legal and illegal by your own standard, because you'll be judged by the same standard you judge others. But he doesn't say not to judge people by God's standards. He doesn't say it. He actually says to judge a person by their fruit, by their actions. So the kind of thing is, let's say you saw somebody and you see a certain look on their face. You don't really know what they're thinking. You don't know what their heart's intent is. And if you were to just try to judge and say, I think they're thinking this or that, that would be the type of judgment he's saying not to do. Or if you were to try to add extra rules or laws that have nothing to do with anything God's already said, that's the kind of judgment that he talks against. But then he goes on to talk about the type of way you are to judge. And he says there's good prophets and bad prophets. And a bad tree doesn't produce good fruit. And a good tree doesn't produce bad fruit. You can know the tree by their fruits. He also said to be wise and discerning, to have discernment, which is good judgment. So there was some people telling me that I didn't need to judge, and but I don't care if people judge me. I really don't. And it's beneficial to be judged. I don't care if people should use critical thinking skills, but people should judge by actions, not assumptions. And Jesus gets misquoted on this. He was never teaching don't judge people by their actions or their behavior. He was teaching don't judge off of assumptions. Like one time, a woman made this face. She was in the choir, she made this face. And another woman said, I can tell what she's thinking. She's thinking about this. And you don't know that. Like, let's say you might be looking at someone and they make a funny face of disgust, and you might think it's directed toward you, but they may have remembered something. Like they remembered, oh, I forgot to take out the trash and it stinks. That's the kind of, like, you cannot judge off of superficial things, the matters of the heart, but you can judge based on actions. So Jesus taught that you know what's in someone's heart by their words. The words come from the overflow of the heart. He said, you know if a prophet's good or bad by their fruits, by their works. So he taught to judge and he taught not to judge. But you got to look at the context of what he's talking about. And so in the name of allowing all evils, people have said, don't judge me, don't judge, don't judge. Like it's like the worst. But that's another way to say that the kind of judgment that they're saying would be to say, don't think, don't hold me accountable. And that's not, like, people will try to lecture Christians and say, oh, you're judging. And say, oh, you're not a Christian because you're judging. Well, Jesus taught to judge. He said to judge based on God's standards. He said if you make your own standards, you'll be judged more harshly. He talked about ways to judge and ways not to judge. But if you saw someone going around stabbing people in the neck, you see him stab this guy, stab that guy, and you said, he's a murderer. That would be judging. But Jesus didn't say not to do it. He said to judge in that kind of judgment. If you see someone stealing and you say they're a thief, that's good judgment. That's, so I don't care if you judge me Hold me accountable. Judge me based on my actions. Judge me based on my words. I don't care. I think it's very weak people that are always saying, don't judge me, or it's people just not wanting to be held accountable. Why am I outside? Because I'm going over to my friend's house to take a shower because I've still not fixed my broken well. My heart does go out to the Palestinians. I think it's really, but there's I don't know if there's any kind of real way to resolve the conflict. And normally the way these things get sorted out is whoever's got the most power wins. Because you see a lot of people are saying free Palestine, but no one's doing anything really to help. They try to help, and then Israel seizes the aid. The only way to really stop the genocide would be to actually go to war with the state of Israel. And so there's a lot of people willing to say free Palestine, but there's not a lot of people willing to go free Palestine. And so I think it's very sad. But, like the Darfur genocide, the Armenian genocide, all the Slavic Christians that were genocided by the Jews, every time there's been a genocide, no one's ever really stopped it that I can think of. Now, I don't know everything that's happened in history, but it seems like anytime a genocide happens, they lie about it. They say it's not going on. Some people feel bad. Some people raise awareness. But you could argue all day. At the end of the day, everything's decided by force and power. And I really don't see military action being taken against Israel. And that's really what it would require. These people are going to starve to death and die and be shot and killed by Israel. And people are going to say, free Palestine, free Palestine. And people are going to say, but unless you're going to get a gun and go over there and shoot the IDF and win, I think that we're going to watch just another genocide happen. And I think it's very terrible and very sad. But then there's the, they're both subversives. Like if you let Jews in your country, they automatically, they come in as traitors. Like take Iceland, for example. They just got a rabbi in their capital city, and he's saying, y'all need to let Syrians move into Iceland. Why? Are Jews going to let Syrians move into Israel? Hell no. Are they going to invite them to live in their Jew-only sections of New York? Hell no, they're not. And this is really this is something that frustrates me about the Jews. They go into every single other country and they demand those countries to do the exact opposite of what they do. Jews are very tribalistic. They have a lot of in-group bias. They're very nationalistic, but they demonize that everywhere else because they want to make everywhere a good host for the Jews. But then at the same time, the Muslims, when they're a minority, they advocate for minority rights. They advocate for acceptance of all kind of people. But then when they become a majority, they want to impose Sharia law. So since I am not a Muslim and I am not a Jew, I'm kind of I don't know what to do about this. Because on one hand, I do think that the Jews are in the wrong with how they're treating Palestine and how they're conquering Palestine and how they're killing them all. I think that the Jews are in the wrong. But at the same time, I don't want a whole bunch of, Palestinians moving into my area because they would immediately start, once they got the majority, they would start killing Christians, calling for Sharia law. I don't know that for sure, but it seems like that's what happens everywhere they go. When they're at 10% of the population or 20%, look at Dearborn, Michigan, or look at any of the cities in America. Once they get a significant, sizable Muslim population, you start hearing about people being decapitated in the street with people shouting Allah Akbar. So it's I guess I'm more anti-Israel than I am. Well, I'm pro-humanity. That's why I have a problem with the Jews. They say other people don't have souls and everybody's supposed to be their slaves. And I disagree with this. The Jews, they always call everyone else racist, and they're the most racist people on the face of the planet. And they've been genociding people ever since they left Egypt. They come out of slavery and went right to enslaving other people. They were crying about being oppressed in Egypt, and they leave with they borrow a bunch of jewelry from the Egyptians and leave and don't give it back and steal it. And then they go and, they fight a lot of their own cousins. They go to war with a lot of people. They get busy to work genociding 7 nations. Before the Jews ever began to genocide the Palestinians, they were genociding the Canaanites. And when they were in Europe, they genocided. It's not taught because Jews own our textbooks, but the Jews killed 60 million people before they were ever put in any concentration camps. The Jews were actively working to boycott a lot of countries and working to starve Germany, and they were working to kill Christians in Eastern Europe. They killed about 60 million, and then people got mad about it. And they reaped a little bit of what they were sowing. And then they continued to kill another 140 million people. After Nazi Germany fell, the Jews continued to control the Soviet Union. And they continued to persecute and kill Christians after World War II was over. There was another 50 years of Jews putting people into concentration camps. So it's like, we don't really hear about the 200 million people that the Jews killed. We just hear 6 million Jews died. But why were people angry at the Jews? They were angry at the Jews for genociding Eastern European people. And a lot of Jews wrote that they thought that the Eastern European people were less evolved and would not be ready to accept communism, that they weren't evolved enough and they needed to die. And they would take their food and starve them and do all kind of god-awful, horrible things to it, just horrible. And a lot of this comes from the Jews' belief that they are the superior human, that they're God's children, but nobody else is, that they have souls, but no one else does, and that everyone is supposed to be their property. And so this is why I caution people about siding with Israel over Palestine, is because the Jews don't really make a distinction between Palestinians and African Americans or Asians or Europeans or Filipinos or Indonesians or anyone. To the Jew, every non-Jew is just meant to be their property and slaves. And so when the Jews get done genociding Palestine, then they'll start trying to genocide Egypt and genocide Iraq and genocide Lebanon and genocide Jordan and genocide Saudi Arabia. And, it won't stop. Once the Jews, if they are successful in genociding Palestine, then they'll genocide the Egyptians to the Nile River, and they'll genocide Jordan and Iraq to the Euphrates River, and they'll genocide northern Saudi Arabia, and they'll genocide Lebanon, and they'll keep on going. If the Jews acquire all the trade routes between Africa, Europe, and Asia, and they get the oil fields, and they control from the Euphrates River to the Nile River, up between then they'll have this great empire, and they still believe that they have a future coming king, a Messiah that will enslave all the nations to them. So if you support Israel and you're wanting to send money to Israel, keep in mind that they plan on conquering the world and making everyone their slaves. Now, on the other side of that, the Muslims believe that they're supposed to fight in the fighting where they are killed until there is no one except those who say there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. And then at the same time, the Catholics with the Pope, with the Jesuit order, they want every king to acknowledge the Pope as sovereign. And so it's really tricky here because, the Jews, they would, if they could, conquer the world and enslave everybody to their way of doing things. But the Muslims would do the same thing with Sharia law. And the Catholics would do the same thing with the Jesuit order. So really all nations have their own national interest. And I don't know, but I do think that a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about Palestine and Israel. The Israelis absolutely teach their children to hate Palestinians and see them as subhuman and treat them as such. Pretty much if Israel ever accuses anyone of doing anything, that's what they're doing. when Israel says they teach their children to hate, well, Israel teaches their children to hate. When Israel says Europeans are racist, Israel's racist. No one in the world is more racist than the Jews. It is, I mean, even Nazi Germany was not as racist as Talmudic Jews. So, the Nazis were really a reaction to the Jews genociding 60 million Christians in Eastern Europe. The Bolshevik Revolution, it was a reaction to it. German supremacy was a reaction to Jewish supremacy. And I don't know, humans need to realize the humanity in other humans, even humans different from them. And it's when to someone all you are is an infidel or a goyim, there's all kind of different words people use to try to dehumanize other people so that they can feel okay about wronging them. And it's really tragic. And I hope one day humanity progresses further. But really, it's almost like our natural state is war. And peace is just a little intermissions because if we went to war all the time, we would go extinct and destroy everything. But it seems like peace is just one side surrendering temporarily. And it's sad and tragic, the human condition. And a lot of people will say, the animals are better, but they're really not. They just have less power. If a chimpanzee had as much power as humans, they'd do just as much evil. Humans do a lot of good too that gets unnoticed. Humans are not a cancer on the earth. Humans are the most powerful species on earth, and we have the power to do the greatest good or the greatest evil. And but a lot of nations are acknowledging that, and a lot of organizations, like people like Ben Shapiro, straight up lie knowing they're lying, where he tries to say only a few unprofessionals that don't know what they're talking about have called it a genocide. That is absolutely not true. Doctors Without Borders has called it a genocide, and I don't know all the organizations and can't name them, but I heard someone name off a list of it sounded like about 10 different organizations that all acknowledge that Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinians, which really they have been since 1947. They really showed up in 1947, and the more power they gained, the more territory they acquired, and the more people they killed. A lot of people, like, a lot of these Palestinians had cattle, and then the Jews robbed them of their cattle because cattle was a way for them to be self-sufficient. They could get milk, they could get meat, they could get fur for clothes and housing, And so the Jews took the Palestinians' cattle, they took their homes, they blew up their houses, they didn't give them build permits, they give them a different license plate where they're not allowed to travel on roads that are convenient. They gridded up the area. They put checkpoints everywhere. They made it inconvenient for Palestinians to move around and everything. And they slowly and systematically have been really, the genociding of the Palestinians began in 1947. And it has just intensified. And a lot of people were in denial about it. Almost in every country in the world, the Jews control the press. And so people were getting their news from Jewish-owned media, and Jewish-owned media did not really report the truth about what's going on in Palestine. President Jimmy Carter from Georgia, the same state I'm from, he went to Israel, and he wanted to go and walk around where the Palestinians were. And Israel was like, no, don't do that. We can't guarantee your protection. And so he went alone. He went with no guards whatsoever, and he just walked, and he just saw the reality on the ground. And really, the Israelis have been genociding the Palestinians this whole time. Now they've just escalated it, and it's too hard for them to cover up the lie anymore. And I really do hope that some military action will be taken against Israel. And if it's not, then we're going to just see these people exterminated in our lifetimes. Really, what I think, the American government gives Israel $1 billion. Like some of these aircrafts we give them cost $2 billion a piece. Billion with a B. That's 1,000 millions. And then we give them a lot of aircraft that cost $2 billion this year. We give them $5 billion and another bill to give them $2 billion, but every year we give them $38 billion. You know, what would happen if instead of giving Israel $38 billion, we fix problems here at home? Or what if we spent $38 billion trying to convert the Israelis? You know, like they pay a lot of money to pay bots to try to influence Americans. The Jewish lobby pays a lot of money to buy off all of our politicians, to silence rivals, to assassinate people, to kidnap people, to do terrorist attacks, to try to frame the Arabs. The Jews do this all the time. All the time, the Jews will do a terrorist attack and then try to blame it on, like they sunk the USS Liberty and tried to blame it on Egypt to try to trick America into going to war with Egypt. You know, and Israel was behind 9/11 with help from their Jewish friends in the FBI. And then they try to pin this on, you know, a CIA operative. You know, the Bush family and the Osama family are in bed together with oil deals. And Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset. He worked with the CIA. This was all just Israel and America trying to put the blame on the Arabs to trick the Americans into fighting all the Arabs for the Jews. And a lot of people still believe the lies they were told. And every single country that got invaded got a Rothschild bank. And so sometimes, you know, I don't care. No, I'm saying I scrolled up on the comments because I didn't notice that comment. I will let people judge me. That's beneficial to me. So let's say someone gives me a judgment about myself and it's untrue. Why would I be bothered about it? But what if it is true? And what if I needed to hear it? I'm not a weak person. I don't care if people judge me. I want people to judge me. I want people to criticize me. I want people to give me feedback. I want positive, I want the positive encouragement and everything, but I don't mind constructive criticism. Or even sometimes when people see me as an enemy and they're not even trying to help me. And sometimes when they criticize me, they're right. Sometimes I get mad about it, and years later I find out they was right. So I welcome judgment. I don't fear the judgment. I'm gonna get off of this though.